Welcome to one of the little yarn corners in our home. We don't very often film inside, but today it's raining and Natalia is at summer camp, and I thought it's a very good opportunity to talk about the upcoming knit along. So maybe the best place to start is by telling you where the idea came from. I always like that. I always like to know with knit alongs, how did the idea start? Well, this one started the way that other knit alongs that we've done or participated in started, with a group of friends. And the last knit along that we were part of, we weren't able to complete. Well, Natalia gave up because she just couldn't make the size work for her, and that's okay. It happens sometimes that you start a project and it doesn't work and it gets frogged and who knows what happens to it. And I'm still plugging away slowly at finishing up mine. So that particular knit along, we were co-hosting, and we were co-hosting it with Petra and Natasha. They have Knit Inc. podcast. It's a mother-daughter duo, and if you don't know Knit Inc., look them up because they're excellent. We will put a link in the description box below, but the podcast is lovely to watch, and the knits that they come up with are so inspiring. I think you would enjoy the energy that they have. So if you like our podcast, you'll love Knit Inc. So Natasha and Petra, and details will be in the... Oh, goody. Where's Natalia? Details will be below. In that below place. I'm hopeless without Natalia. And we were also, so there was a group of 3 of us co-hosting it. Also co-hosting was a very, very sweet friend called Joyce. And Joyce has the Ruby Cottage podcast. And Joyce's colors are just vibrant, and Joyce is vibrant, and I love the way that she speaks. She's from America, and she has this fabulous American accent that I could listen to all day, and she's just a wonderful person. And so she doesn't do a podcast, she does a yurt cast. She comes in her podcast from her home, which is in a yurt in the mountains. And yeah, again, if you haven't seen that podcast, I recommend. So this particular knit along, it came about because there's a group of us that chat fairly frequently, and we all enjoy Nutiden yarn. Surprise. So it often happens that, you meet, how to describe this funny world that we live in. You meet in a post and you start chatting with each other through the thread in the post, and that is what happened this time. And actually the person that we should thank for the inspiration for the knit along is Ellen, who made the original garment, but also my dear friend Navneet, who lives in India, who right away started to find the information. And then I jumped on and said, oh, it's so beautiful. And Carmen from Knitting a Good Yarn, she started to talk, and oh, I want to make that, and I want to make that. And Navneet said, why don't we start our own little KAL? Yeah, why don't we start our own little KAL? This KAL has grown into something that's wonderful and beautiful and such a charming community, but it's hardly little. Sorry, Navneet. So another woman from Germany, she joined us, and then Carmen and Jackie were starting a new podcast. They had talked about starting a knitting podcast together. They are 2 friends who live in Ontario, and they met through the CadyJax podcast. So you'll have to watch their podcast to hear really the story of their friendship, the way it developed. But Carmen and I have been friends, chatting about our enjoyment of different yarns and patterns, and especially Nutiden, for quite some time. And so I said, yeah, let's do this. And Carmen said, oh, well, we're thinking about starting a new podcast. And then Jackie, who is a bundle of energy and an absolutely delightful person, she's wonderful. Go and watch Knitting a Good Yarn. I really think that you're going to enjoy these two podcasters. Jackie is fabulous. She has so much energy. She has so much enthusiasm, and she is so creative. But she's also probably one of the most supportive knitting friends that I've ever met. She's just so encouraging, and she has some very, very neat ideas for the upcoming knit along. Anyhow, Jackie and Carmen were talking about starting a podcast, and then one of us said, oh, let's meet on Zoom and chat with each other and figure out the details of the knit along. And then all of a sudden they started the podcast, and I love the way they started. They started not with episode 1 because they weren't quite ready for episode 1. So they started with episode 0.5, and they've done 2 episodes now, and I think they started with 0.5, they're at 0.75, I think. It's so cute. Anyhow, so lots of information about the knit along on those 2 episodes of that knitting podcast called Knitting a Good Yarn. So the 3 of us and Navneet in India, and then another woman who lives in Germany. So then it became 5 of us talking about the knit along, and then Ellen said, oh, I'll help you. And Ellen provided information. She's the woman who originally knit the sweater. And we make promises on this podcast that I am embarrassed about. We have promised sometimes to put a picture in, and then we never do because I'm rubbish at figuring out how to do that. But, so sorry. But we do provide really detailed links below. This time, I'm just gonna pull it up on my phone so that I for sure show you the picture. So, this is the sweater. And Ellen, who works with the company Honor in Sweden, these are the makers of Nutiden, she knit the sweater. And as it turns out, there isn't a pattern for this particular sweater. Exactly. At least Ellen didn't follow a pattern. And so it was really awesome that she was willing to say, oh yeah, this is how I did this, and that's how I did that, because where to start? So she told us that there is a pattern that is inspired by the motif that she used, and it is on the Filkalana website. I've looked at that pattern and I think it's excellent. I think it's really well written, and it's also available for free. So that pattern is bottom up. And I did a swatch using the instructions in the Filkalana pattern. So I used the needle size that Filkalana recommends. I think it's, oh goody, maybe 4 millimeters. I can't quite remember. Anyhow, I did a swatch, and this is my swatch. Now, for the knit along, we are starting on September 1st, and there's going to be a cast on party. The details for that are over at Knitting a Good Yarn, and I might pop in sometime in August to give you a few more details if I can, but otherwise you can find all the information either at Knitting a Good Yarn, or if you follow me on Ravelry, where I am Donna Maria's daughter, because I am. That's my mother. Anyhow, so you can find me at Donna Maria's daughter on Instagram, and Donna's daughter on Ravelry. And in Donna Maria's daughter, in the Instagram feed, at the top where the highlights are, I have one called knit along, or I think I've changed the name to Ellen Inspired. Yes, the highlight is called Ellen Inspired, and officially the KAL is called Inspired by Ellen, but it wouldn't fit, so Ellen Inspired is how I have it in the highlights, and you can find all the information in there. In fact, I try to lift other makers a lot, and especially women, but you know, everyone. And so makers that I really enjoy their work, you can find in my highlights. You can find potters that I really like. You can find knitting designers, knitwear designers, yarn makers, poetry, all sorts of things, or all sorts of goodies. And then yeah, well, that's mostly what's there. A little bit about the Yukon. What else is in the highlights? You'll have to go and have a look. So you're most welcome to follow me, Donna Maria's Daughter, on Instagram, and or just go there and check out the pictures and look at the highlights if you like. But all of the information for this knit along is going to be available on my Instagram account in a highlight called Ellen Inspired. So this is my first swatch, and I'm so happy with the color choice that I'm not even going to do another swatch. I'll show you though the one that I was thinking about. The thing about Nutiden is the colors depend on a lot of different factors. It depends on the weather because they dye outside. It depends on the dye lot of the dyes that they use. Depends on the different combination of yarns that they get, because they source all their yarn in Sweden, and they try as much as they can to use heritage breed wool in Sweden. Really the best is to go to their website, the Nordic website, and I'll put the link below. I won't. Natalia will put the link below for you. But go to their website and you'll find all the information about their process. This being said, because they dye their wool in the wool by hand before they run it through the machines depend on the weather as well, the temperature, the humidity, all of these factors, they all influence the final product. And so creating exactly the same colorway over and over and over and over again is impossible. They could never do that. So what they do, and stay true to the process that they want to maintain. So frequently a colorway that came out earlier will reappear in a different iteration. So if you really like these colors, I'm sure that you can find something that is similar. But I think the blue is all gone now. I thought about this yellow with the blue, and I think it would have been lovely. Maybe that's better. Yep, that's better. It would have been lovely, and if you do yellow and blue, I'd love to see it. But I decided that this gray really showed off the pattern so well, and I just loved the color combination of the gray with the blue. Caroline from Nutiden, the maker of Nutiden, described how she was inspired to come up with this colorway, and she talked about the bottoms of the clouds when they're really heavy and ready to rain, and they look like this dark blue off in the distance, and the brown colorway, or this grayish brown colorway, is inspired by a road that they often walk on together, she and her husband. So I just thought that the combination was beautiful. I love the stories behind the colorways, and so this is definitely what I'm going to go with. And I liked how strong the blue was with the with this gentle gray brown. So this is my choice, and this is the motif. So in the sweater that Ellen made, the motif starts at the bottom of the sweater and then goes all the way up. she did the motif on the arms as well. And I'm not quite sure what my sweater will look like yet, but I have heard from other people who are talking about, well, maybe I'll just do the motif, you know, up to here, up to where the arms join, and then I'll have the top part with just a solid color. I've also heard of people doing a cowl. You are most welcome to use the motif. If you want to join the KAL, use the motif in any way that you want. You can use it in the original sweater design, which we're saying is inspired by Ellen, because it is. You can do it that way. You can just use part of the motif. Jackie made some socks recently that are really cool, and she did 2 repeats of just this part of the motif on the cuff part of her sock, and it looked really fabulous. I definitely want to try to integrate this into a pair of mittens. I think it would look really, really cool to have this part at the bottom and then have, you know, like that going up. And I'm not sure yet if I'll do full mittens that cover my whole hand or just make some fingerless mittens. I'm not sure yet, but I really, really like that. Natalia is talking about making, what are they called? Leg warmers. So putting the pattern along a leg from the ankle up to the knee. She runs long distance running and she does a lot of skiing, so she's outside a lot and she does that all year round. So in the winter time when she's running, it's really important to keep warm. So this would be really lovely for her. I've made her a number of pairs. We've never shown them on the podcast because they're frankly gross. She runs in them and they're dirty and, well, dirty. They're, you know, they have mud stains on them and I don't know, I just don't think it's interesting. But if you want to see them, we can certainly show you a pair next time. But she wants to make leg warmers and have this pattern at the very bottom. And Natalia's idea is to just do one stripe up the side of the leg, and then the rest of the leg will be just a solid color. So on either side of her leg there'll be a stripe, which is sporty, I think, and quite fun. So lots of different ideas that you can do with this motif, and I cannot wait to see how you're going to use it. One of the color combinations that I thought about for this knit along, and probably the most serious contender to this blue and gray brown, I don't know, I have no idea what this color is. In some lights it looks gray, in some lights it looks brown. Anyhow, another very, very serious contender for this was this color, which is called Lola. I love this color of purple. I love it so much. This is one from an earlier shop update, and I have enough to make something. They will definitely be something coming up, but it's just not going to be the sweater. But this colorway, this purple colorway called Lola, and I wanted to combine it with this one. Now the light is blowing it out, and I'm sorry that you can't see really, really well, but if you have Nutiden, you'll know yourself, it's so hard to get a good picture of it because it shifts, it changes, there are so many colors integrated. But this one I think was called Langusta, and this colorway has purple and yellow and gray and brown, and it looks, I think, so good. Yeah, if I go closer, it's just blowing out more. Maybe if I pull back. Yeah, that's pretty reasonable. It looks pink, but when you knit it up in a swatch, those yellow flecks that are in this one come out, and yeah, I love, 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 love this color combination. So it's going to be something in the future. It's just not going to be my Inspired by Ellen sweater. Another combination that I obviously love is really anything with orange. I love orange. I like orange and I like yellow. Those are my two very favorite colors. This one is El Ciel from, oh, maybe 2 years ago now. And this is also with El Ciel. I would recommend, if you are going to knit with Nutiden, I would recommend when you go to buy the yarn, buy enough. I think it's quite reasonably priced. One of these plates, which is more than 100 grams, usually about 100, but definitely 100 grams of yarn. And whenever you order from Nordic, you're always going to get a little bit more than you ordered. You'll never be shorted yarn. You're never going to get a little bit less. So I would though recommend, if you see a colorway that you really, really, really love, as I did with El Ciel, I would recommend that you buy plenty because, as I was saying, it only comes around, one colorway only comes around once. So I actually ended up buying 600 grams of the El Ciel, and with 600 grams I have more than enough for this sweater. I have another sweater. This is Fern and Feather by Jennifer Steingast, Knit Love Wool. This Fern and Feather is on the needles right now, and I'm sure that I will have a little bit left even at the end of that, and I already have an idea of how to use it. But buy enough for yourself. If you're first time to try Nutiden, I would recommend the same as what Caroline herself suggests. 500 grams should be enough for a sweater and 300 grams for a shawl. They do sell just single plates. This is not a full plate, by the way. This is a full plate. This is just part of a plate. So they do sell 100 gram plates, and you can buy just a single plate as well if you want to just try a color, or you don't want to commit to a full order of Nutiden. But if you see a color that you love, show up on time for the shop update. Some of the colorways sell out super, super fast, and but you never know. You really, really never know. Sometimes it's surprising how one colorway that you think is going to be there for 0 minutes, and you have to be at the shop update really, really early, is there for ages, and you can buy it again in another shop update, and others just are gone in a matter of minutes. So if you're looking on their Instagram feed and you see a colorway that you really like, get to the shop update on time and order enough for yourself. Now this sweater, this is the Versal by Ailbiona McLaughlin, and I love this pattern. This is probably my favorite sweater pattern. It's so versatile. I've used it a number of times. I've changed the size a number of times. I've given them away as gifts. I have this one, which is mine. I have another one, which is blue from a few, maybe 2 years ago. But I wanted to show this one to you because I made this one this winter, and I haven't shown it yet on the podcast, but I also wanted to show it to you in the context of this knit along, because this is a pattern that I think you could probably do something with the motif. And what I was thinking would be really neat to do is, I think if you're clever at the math and figuring out for yourself how to do things, I think that you could probably put that, how do you call this? I don't know. To me it looks like arrows. Anyway, you could probably put this down the arms if you wanted, and I think that would be really, really cool. What I did on this version of my Versal is I wanted to include this cuff design, which is inspired actually by the Hemma fingerless mittens. I talked about those in our previous episode of the podcast, but Inese Sang, who is another of my favorite designers, she designed these fingerless mittens called the Hemma mittens, and they had cuffs like this, and I liked the cuffs so much that I decided I wanted to integrate them into a sweater. So I did these cuffs and I-cord bind off, and then along the edge of the cuff, to separate the cuff from the sleeve, I don't know if that's working to show you. I'll come close. Oh, I don't know if you can see that, but anyhow, there is, just before the cuff joins the sleeve, I put a Latvian braid. The texture is inspired by Ronja Hakalehto. She has a sweater pattern where she does this kind of a texture, which I am pretty sure is called a moss stitch. It's a texture that you create with knits and pearls, and so I did all over texture. I was a little bit nervous, but it worked out. For the seams of the, they're not seams, but like where the increases go to create the shape of the sweater, I did just like a regular knit stitch along there, 2 rows of that. So there's this knit stitch that separates sleeve and the body. And then for the cowl neckline, and I didn't want a turtleneck, tight neckline. I wanted it to be open so that the sweater would work for me, for what I wanted to wear it for. And I ended up, I think, getting exactly what I wanted. I wanted to have an open neck so that air could get in to keep me cooler, so that I didn't overheat in the sweater and I wouldn't have to constantly be putting it on and off. But I wanted the cowl to allow me to tuck something else in around my neck, like a cowl or a small scarf, or something like that I can wrap around my neck. I wear shawls a lot, and so I also wanted it to be flexible enough that if I wrapped a shawl around it, that the cowl would kind of tuck in. So I didn't want it to be too big, but I didn't want it to be so tight and small that I couldn't get something else in there and layer, because we do spend a lot of time outside, and layers are so important for regulating body temperature and being comfortable outside. So this part is a broken rib stitch, and this part was inspired by Evil Knits, evil.knits, or Miss Evil on Instagram. She also has a blog. I'll put her link below. If you need help with the upcoming KAL, I strongly recommend that you watch the podcast series of videos that she's created called On Creativity. She really encourages knitters to make their garments their own and really take ownership over their knitting and feel that what they make will work for what they want it to work for. And she has lots of really good suggestions for how to modify and how to adjust patterns and come up with a sweater that you really like, or a garment that you really like. She has recipes for mittens and socks. I knit dozens of her socks. I love them. I have so many pairs of them. I feel like I always have a pair of, they're called kura socks, and I feel like I always have a pair of kura socks somewhere in my knitting. And they work with many different yarns. They were designed for Nutiden, but they work with many different yarns. I've used a number of yarns to make those socks. and they've worked out well. Anything from a DK to a worsted weight, I used all of those in the socks and they did turn out lovely. And right now I'm experimenting with a fingering weight, and we'll see how that works out. Anyhow, Miss Evil is a wonderful resource for boosting your confidence, to figure out how to go out on your own and create your own pattern, create your own garments, create your own knits that work for you. Another person that I want to recommend is Melissa from Knitting the Stash. She's in New England and she offers courses. You can actually take an online course and it's around $40 US. But the way she explains things, her process explanation and how she builds out her garments is fabulous. She has a podcast. It's available freely on YouTube. It's called Knitting the Stash, and I highly, highly, highly recommend that you pop over there and take a look at what she does as well. And yeah, so definitely two very strong resources for you. The Filcolana website, which we will link, has a pattern that you can use and it will work for Nutiden. I wanted to test it out and see how the gauge was, and I think it will work fine for the sweater. So that will definitely work. I think it's written for DK weight, so you don't have to use Nutiden. You could use any yarn you want. The Filcolana pattern I think is for DK weight. It's actually been designed for their yarns, so go over and check that out. And this is the book that Ellen herself was using. This is the English translation of the book. We'll put the details below. On Knitting a Good Yarn, our friends Jackie and Carmen have also featured this book and talked about it. It's quite an affordable book. I do think that the friend of ours who is in Germany already has a copy. I am pretty sure that Navneet in India managed to get herself a copy. So the point is, you can Google up this, or whatever search engine you want. You can search up this title and find this particular resource online, and it's quite easy to find. And this particular copy was $20 US. So it's a fantastic resource. I would very, very strongly recommend this book, not just for the KAL, but there's so many good techniques. There's charts for all the different patterns, like all these different motifs are charted in the book. And if you like Scandinavian knitwear and you like the look of it and you like the design, this is an excellent resource for understanding the construction behind. So it's written by Vibeke Lund, and I think the first edition was in Swedish, but there are mitten instructions. I know it's blowing out something awful, but you can certainly see the mitten. There's instructions for how to do the mittens. There's all kinds of sweaters in there. And if I can get it to show, there is the sweater that inspired Ellen to knit her sweater and in turn inspired us. So there's the chart in this particular resource. So Vibeke Lund, knitting in the Nordic tradition. I did want to show you one of the resources that I found recently for managing my circular knitting needles. These knitting needle cards, I love them. They are made by a Swedish maker. She's available, you can find her on Instagram as Yale and the Bags, and these cards are awesome. I love them for organizing my needles. I bought a few of them from her. She has a newsletter that you can subscribe to, and then if you're subscribed to the newsletter, you get updates for when her product is available, because she is a one-woman show making these things herself, but when she has these knitting needle cards available, you hear about it through the newsletter, and then you can purchase them from her if you're interested. I find these so useful for organizing my knitting needles, and you can fit quite a few. So this is what it looks like with no knitting needles attached, and it's just a card, so you can store your needles really easily. And I especially like them for tucking into my knitting bags and then taking them with me, because the knitting needles stay, there's a pocket for the tips, they stay neat and tidy, they don't get tangled up in my knitting and the other things that I'm working on. So highly recommend this resource as well. And then before I go, I want to talk about what's coming up on my knitting journey, what I'm going to knit next. So another podcaster that I will very much recommend to you is Leanne from the Knitty Stew, another Canadian podcaster, and she's so much fun. Stew, S-T-E-W, and of course we'll link her, but Stew for stewardess or flight attendant. She is a flight attendant who works for one of our Canadian carriers, and she has a really fun podcast. Very much recommend Leanne from Knitting the Stew. I learned about her from my friend Sarah, who has the Fiber Trek podcast, and we've talked about Fiber Trek on our podcast before. Definitely recommend Sarah's podcast, Fiber Trek. So certainly look out for her. But she was telling me about this new podcast that she had found and said, "Oh, Loretta, you're gonna love it." And it's Leanne's podcast, The Knitty Stew, and I do love it. So I highly recommend it for you as well. And, you know, this is just like the Inspired by Ellen KAL. We get inspired by our friends and what they're making, and what we see on Instagram, and through the podcasts that we watch. So she knit the Shift Cowl by Andrea Mowry, and I've looked at that pattern a number of times, and I like it, but the big one is a big commitment, and the smaller cowl, so there's two versions of the pattern, and then it refines itself in a new iteration in the form of a sweater, and I really like the texture of the piece that Andrea designed, but I just didn't like the way that the cowl sat, and it's because, well, you'll see when I knit it, I'll show you, but if you want to see it right away, go over to the Knitty Stew and watch one of Leanne's episodes. I'll put the episode number, I think it's 3 maybe, not sure. I'll put the episode number where she talks about her Shift cowl in the description box. That's what it's called, description box, in the description box below. And anyhow, I saw hers, and I've been wanting to make one for such a long time. She's genius. So simple. She, instead of joining, so the cowl is a triangular shaped cowl, and then you join the back of the cowl up. And it's quite a long join along the back of the cowl, and then it sits quite high, and there's a little point that comes down in the front, and it was designed for ease of wear, so that you could just, instead of having a big shawl that you have to manage and tie, and you know, if you wear big shawls, they're big shawls. There's a bit of fabric management in the wearing of the piece, and there's a bit of an art to tying a shawl. And so there is this other pattern called the Shift, which is just a cowl version of the shawl, and the idea is that you can just throw it over, you know, you're wearing jeans and a t-shirt, you're running out the door, and you can just pull this over and fluff it a little and you're done. Well, I didn't like the way that it sat, because I thought this is quite a high you know, it didn't sit the way that I would want, in the photos, the way that I would want to wear it myself. Well, Leanne goes and knits it and then has just a tiny bit of fabric that is joined. Genius! So it sits much more like a shawl, it's much more open, and I thought, I don't know why I didn't think of that, and I love that. So I decided that I need one myself. So yeah, right. So I went ahead and invested in some spin cycle yarns, and it is an investment. This is quite quite costly yarn, you know, not super, but I think that it's an investment, I would say. But I wear these pieces a lot, and one of the reasons that I love to wear a shawl or a cowl is it's instantly dressy, and where I live, it's cold. It's cold all the time. It's August and I'm wearing wool. I can wear wool all year round here, and so trying to find clothes that I can wear like at work, to a meeting, to some event, trying to find something that is warm but also kind of dressy can be a challenge. And so integrating shawls into my wardrobe really helps me to not just own fewer pieces of clothes, because you can really change the look of an outfit by changing up the shawls. So not only can I keep my wardrobe a little bit smaller, which I frankly prefer, but also I can adapt a little bit better to different situations. So I bought Salty Dog and Frosty Night and Overpass, and I've already skeined up Overpass, and I'm gonna throw these two in with it and make myself a shift cowl. And if I'm clever, I'll stick a photo in here, maybe, I hope. So that's one shawl that I have, or a cowl that I have planned. And then I was talking about Inese Sang, and she has a shawl called Annalise Autumn Shawl, and it was inspired by Miss Evil from the Miss Evil podcast. And it's a beautiful shawl design with I think it's a roanberry motif, or in North America we call them mountain ash. I have one of these trees growing just outside of my house, and in Inese's culture they are used for luck. So I bought myself this yarn, which I'm gonna make that shawl from, and this is from Viola and the Moon yarn, and I think it's really, really, really beautiful. This colorway is called Lettuce, and this is a Polworth alpaca fingering weight, and this one is just a small little bit of silk mohair, 72% mohair, 28% silk, and this colorway is called Algae. And again, there, that's about the right colors. So the shawl will be, it's quite a large shawl. The main color of the shawl is obviously the lettuce, and then the little nubs that make the roan berries are going to be out of this beautiful silk mohair. So that one is coming. I want to get this going right away. It's dreamy. So there's this, and then I have one more that I want to show you. And if I show you, then I'll do them faster, right? So, Viola and the Moon is a Canadian company. I learned about Viola and the Moon from my friend Nicole, who has the Gentle Knitter podcast. I'm sure you know Nicole of the Gentle Knitter. She introduced me to Viola and the Moon, which is beautiful yarn. I have a feeling, pardon me, I have a feeling that it was also Nicole who showed me Origin yarn. And Origin yarn, I wish that I could find a way to show you. No, it's not going to work. I wish I could find a way to show you the tags, because the tags on these yarns are so cute. Spin Cycle has a pirate sheep, and Viola and the Moon has a beautiful moon and lovely lettering and just lovely. Everything about the presentation from these companies is beautiful. Even the tags are beautiful. So Origin Yarns is another friend of mine, Versal, who lives in Quebec, and hello Versal, your package is on its way. We traded packages this year. Anyway, there's several things that we just have in common in life and experiences that are similar, and I love her colorways. She dyes yarns, she sources them very carefully. They are organic yarn, and they're heavenly to touch. So, and like Nutiden, she comes out with colorways and they're only available once, and again, it's the same thing. It's really, really hard to maintain exactly the same colorway, and this is why when you buy from independent yarn dyers, when you hear other podcasters or the recommendation of the dyer themselves, if you are using many skeins to make a project, they will often suggest to do helical knitting or alternating your skeins or your balls of yarn, you know, row by row as you go through your project, to ensure that the color stays consistent, because getting exactly the same colorway all the time is very difficult for the way that independent dyers process their yarns and create their colors. So with Origin yarns, again, the colorways come out as a collection periodically through the year, and when they're done, and you can't get them again. Well, in January, I was so lucky. I won the giveaway that she was having. So I won some of the yarn, and then I went back and bought some more. So I'm lucky. I have quite a bit of this yarn. So this one is called Nutmeg, and I'm going to use it with this one called Cinnamon. And then she has this absolutely gorgeous 70% mohair, 30% silk, and this one is called Foxtail. I know if I pull them there, that's about the right color. So these ones with them, some of them will have the mohair with them, some of them without the mohair. This one, which is called Star Anise, which I finally learned the English word because I learned this spice when I was in Germany with my friend Nadine, and so I learned this as Sterne Anise, and it's been Sterne Anise in my head ever after. And yeah, so star, I guess it's the same in English, Star Anise. So those ones will go together. And then there's this one off that I bought, one of a kind, which is chestnut and chocolate, and I'm not sure if I will integrate that in or not, but these ones. And then I have, I'll put them here. There, that works, right? Yes, it does. Okay, and then I have this one, which I've already skeined up, and I forget the name of it, but it's not white. It looks kind of white. It's a very pale pink. I think it might be called Dough. Anyhow, so these colors all going to go together, and I have been wanting to knit Stephen West's Vertices Unite shawl for a very, very long time, and I wasn't sure what colorways I wanted to hold, and I didn't know what yarn I wanted to use. And then Vero came out with this collection, and I love it. At first I thought I would knit the Satellite Shawl by Andrea Mowry, but the Satellite Shawl, I tried it a little bit with silk mohair. I don't recommend that. It just didn't, the little swatch that I did, it didn't come out the way that I was hoping it would. The shawl pattern is written for Suri alpaca, and you really, really need to use Suri with it because you're just not going to get the same texture. Suri is more bulky than, even when it's thin, it's just got more heft to it than mohair. So I came up with a new idea, and the second choice shawl, which actually is going to be beautiful, and now that I'm thinking about it, I can't stop thinking about it, but these colors will go into Of Vertices Unite by Stephen West. I wonder if you made one. If you made one, I would love to know about it, and I would love to know what colors you used. And I've been thinking about, oh, when I make that shawl, and when I knit a sweater with the Lola yarn from Nutiden, from Nordic, look at this. Like, look at them together. Isn't that just, like, can you imagine? I'm so excited about this. If you're looking to buy yourself a little treat of the yarny variety, you should definitely look at either Origins, who has these beautiful organic yarns that they're just, every collection that she comes out with is stunning. So there's those. There's another Canadian maker, Viola and the Moon. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful colorways. She's out of Ontario, and her collections are fantastic. I love the inspiration that comes from the community, from all of you, from the friends that I've made through this community, and I think that's what I'm most excited about with this new Inspired by Ellen KAL that will knit along, that will start in September. It will run for 5 months, so there's lots of time. You can make lots of different garments. There will be prizes. We haven't quite figured out how we're going to do the prizes yet. There is a pattern for sure from Filcolana that you could use that is very similar motif. It's not the same as the original sweater that Ellen made. Hers was made out of the inspiration from the Knitting in the Nordic Tradition book. If you need help, there are courses you can take online offered. There's lots of different places you can find information. I'm recommending that you take a class by Melissa from Knitting the Stash. She's not participating directly in the KAL with her classes. They're not designed to go with the Inspired by Ellen KAL. They will work for any pattern, for any sweater, but there's a lot of good information that she has to offer that I'm sure would be helpful to you as you go through the process. And then once the KAL kicks off, we will be here along the way to offer whatever support we can. There's a beautiful community of knitters that are all coming together as part of this KAL. And some will be linked in the description below, and some I want to make sure that their privacy is protected, so we won't link them. But anyhow, there's a lot of different options. The sky is really the limit. You can take this any direction, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait to see the colors you use, the yarns you choose, the motifs, and any of the yarns that I showed you would work. Again, you do not have to use Nutiden, but if you want to, that's the original sweater that inspired the KAL. And Caroline herself, if you are a Patreon member of Nordic, then you can see the podcasts that Caroline did, because she's knitting sweaters with this pattern or this motif as well, and knitting a good yarn. They've already started, as I said. Jackie's got this really, really cool sock. Carmen, who is a color genius, like she can combine colors like nobody's business. It's amazing, the color combinations. She just has such a good eye for color, and the combinations that she's come up with and the tips and tricks for combining colors that she has are fantastic. That's episode 0.5, has a lot of their tips about color. Episode 0.75 has more details about the knit along itself. And then Miss Evil podcast, I know that Miss Evil is participating in the knit along as well, which I'm very excited about. I'm so excited about this, and I can't wait to see what you come up with. So definitely tag me if you've got stuff already on Instagram, and I'd be happy to put it into my story in Instagram, which is Ellen Inspired, in the highlights on my Instagram page. You can go and have a look there for some ideas and more details and information about the knit along. So, whew, that's that. And yeah, I really, really hope that you will join us.